All right, James, no messing about. This person, our guest, scored 237 goals in his NHL career. He had 41 during the 2000-2001 season. He is, I mean, everybody knows who this guy is. He is our buddy, Jeff O'Neill. Jeff, I wanted to ask you, do you remember the guys who scored more than you during that 2001 season? I have it in front of me.
No, the one thing I find crazy, though, is I thought I scored 221 goals. So I was actually quite happy to hear you say 237.
Wait.
I'm pathetic at my own, just like you, Jonas, and Masters are pathetic at trivia. I'm pathetic at my own trivia, where I was like, 237. I'm like, that sounds a lot better than 221. It's like the older you get, I don't know, maybe the more you start the more you forget about your playing days. So I was quite happy to hear 230. But who were the guys ahead of me when I scored 41?
So number one, Pavel Bure had 59.
Wow.
Sakic had 54. Yager had 52. Bondra 45. Kovalev 44. McGillney 43. And then you, Naslund, and Milan Hajduk 41 each.
Yeah. Not bad. I might have to I might have to frame that little chart there, that little list.
That's good company. It's good company. And that's like dead puck era hockey still too, right? Like it wasn't easy 40 was a big deal.
Can you explain to me what I don't like as a former longtime player, I don't even understand what dead puck era means. What the hell does that mean?
It means when scoring was at its lowest because save percentages were through the roof and scoring chances
the hooking
were
and holding. That was major.
That's dead puck era. Yeah. It was like Devils come in, win that 95 cup. And it was like, the Red Wings pushed back against it a little bit with the teams that they had, but there were those years right before the lockout were the worst. That's why like the Shanahan summit and all the rule changes and all that shit came in in the year off because of the dead puck era.
Anybody that scored in that dead puck area where you could absolutely like wrestle a guy to the ground in front of them and hooking and holding, like they deserve their flowers, man, because in that time, and I came in like basically in the middle of it, but anytime like Brett Hull and those guys like Mario to score during that time where you were just getting abused in front of the net, anywhere in the offensive zone, if you went near the puck, you were getting crushed. So any guy that put up numbers during that time, they deserve their flowers because it was no joke.
Do you think that like style was good for your game and your numbers or bad? Like, do you think you would have thrived more in like kind of this open flow hockey that we've got now?
I don't know. As much as I like to call myself kind of like some kind of hybrid power forward, I wasn't the biggest guy, but I like the physicality and that helped my game. But obviously the skill game, if you can go into the slot and you can't even, nobody can put the stick on you, any part of your body, and you're allowed to shoot and it's just not physical, it sure makes life a lot easier out there. So I like to think anybody with any skill that can shoot the puck would have benefited from playing now.
Well, Jeff, I'm looking at the playoff run you had, the Cup final run. So you had 8 goals, 13 points in 22 games. What is the difference? Because this is one thing James and I talk a lot about and obviously gets brought up in a lot of these analytical conversations. What is the difference between regular season hockey and playoff hockey? Like how much harder is it in the playoffs, or is that just something like we talk about?
It really is harder, and it's just really difficult to explain because the stakes are so much greater and everything is amplified in pressure situations. It's all the mental side of it, I believe, because it's like, the momentum sways. Like if you lose game 1, you're already thinking, man, if we lose game 2, we're in a serious problem here. And if you're up in a series and you're up 3-1 and you're lying in bed at night thinking, man, we better win tomorrow because if they get back in the series and they win this game, it's 3-2. So it's just the mental grind where everything is so important. And just like the regular season, Jonas, if you don't get off to a good start, you're squeezing the stick and you're thinking about everything. But you don't have that 82-game segment to try to find your confidence and try to find all the little things you can do to get out of a slump, whether it be extra weight work, extra bike riding, extra shots after practice. You're going at it every day. So the time lapse in between trying to get it together is so small that it's just, you got to do it. It's kind of non-negotiable, as our great friend Jim Taddy says. You got to perform, and it happens really fast. Like, You saw when the Columbus Blue Jackets smoked Tampa like 3 or 4 years ago. It was like you lose that first game, then you lose the second game, and then 8 days later you're out of the playoffs, and you're like, what the hell just happened there? So it's about finding your game and finding it quickly, and not everybody can do it. And going into any season or any series, it's like not everybody can be dialed in, right? But you need the most important guys to kind of flip-flop and take turns of getting the job done. Obviously, the days of Gretzky and Mario, like it was hyper focus on those big time guys to get the job done all the time. Now in the salary cap era, you've got your 6 guys that are highly paid, and they got to kind of rotate. You saw with Tampa Bay a couple of years ago. For the most part, it's Braden Point and Stamkos and Kucherov. So they all got to find a way to contribute and get it done and kind of spread the love out a little bit.
What do you think of where the Leafs are at right now in terms of? There's a couple of things I want to ask, but I'll start here. Like they had 6 guys at the trade deadline. Can you ever remember being part of a team where you like changed the cast that much late in the year? And like,
I was never a part of a team. After a lot of years I played in Carolina, I was sitting there, James, and watching Colorado load up, Detroit load up, Philadelphia Flyers, the New York Rangers, the Devils would usually sprinkle something in. But we usually sat on the sidelines and watched all that nonsense go on. But it all comes back to the same cast of characters that need to get the job done. They've kind of addressed some areas of, intensity, grit, sandpaper, being able to defend, and that's all great. But as much time as they can spend together in the last month or so of the season, I think they should do it just for some camaraderie. And the thing that coaches will always tell you is there's just the one difficult thing is there's not a lot of practice time. It's like every coach says there's so many games and back-to-backs and travel. They don't get on the ice to practice a lot. But I think the one thing that Kyle Dubas, it's a mandate for him, is hockey sense and smart hockey players. And I think anytime you bring that element into the equation, it doesn't matter if there's 10 or 15, you should be able to figure out and get it together. The O'Reilly loss, I kind of don't like it, and I kind of don't mind it at the same time, where it's like, he's brought in for the playoffs, and he's an old school guy, and he's a gamer, and he's a smart guy. So I think he can get it back together in relatively quick order and be ready for the playoffs. You would like to see him in the fold, though, with chemistry and where he's going to play and where he's going to fit. But it's almost like there's the Boston Bruins who just continue to roll, and it seems like they're going to win every night. Whether that can continue in the playoffs remains to be seen. But it's almost like the last month and a half is almost like a mini season for the Leafs, where it's all got to come together. Just like a golfer that wants to be at his best for the majors, they got to try to really kind of tighten it up and have goaltending dialed in, the new guys dialed in, their top players dialed in, and everything moving forward at its peak come playoff time.
Well, one of the things like that the cronies and I and James have been talking about, he's one of the cronies.
Wait, so what's a crony? I missed the reference
Jonas
on the show.
will explain it to you like you're both cronies.
Do you want to know, Jeff? Some guy came up to me in Vancouver and he goes, "You and the cronies." He runs away laughing.
But is it like a bad thing or a good thing? Or like,
no, it's not. It's neither, right? It's neither.
It's a good thing. It's just you guys are basically, you are, this is like not trying to be funny. You guys are smarter than everyone, and you just look at things differently, and that's what makes you guys smart cronies. The smart crony approach is what I call it.
Well,
not just crony.
So one of the crony arguments that I actually went against the cronies with was with the D and some of the things that they did with the D. And James and I wrote about why they were
the cronies are angry at us, Jeff.
This is what I want Jeff to explain. So Jeff, why would
trouble
a coach,
in cronydom? Yeah.
Well, why would a coach? I understand this and I agree with this. But why might a coach in the playoffs look at that defense and say, you know what? I might rather play Luke Schenn than I might play Timothy Liljegren. Like, why? You've been in it. Like, can you explain like what would be the motivation for a move like that?
Well, if you're referring to Luke Schenn playing with Morgan Riley in Vancouver, I kind of get the sense that it was like it's against his old team. He's at home. His wife's at warm up with their kids in the corner. It's like, let's let this guy have a good night. But there's no way that the Maple Leafs could move off of what's happened in the past couple of years, where it's like come playoff time with Tampa Bay, he's almost in and out of the lineup, almost not even regular. Yep. So you can't go from that And they're both quality teams. They're good hockey teams with similar records. You can't go from one to the other and all of a sudden be a frontline defenseman. You do that to Luke Schenn, you're just setting him up to fail. I don't remember the last time that he played top line minutes in that league. I mean, it's been a long time since his younger days, maybe when he was with Toronto or Philly or something. So that would be a mistake. Even a guy like Timothy Liljegren, you talk about Luke Schenn and Justin Hall, and they got some decisions to make back there, and they got to figure out what works best and who pairs well with each other. But I think Liljegren is a guy that you guys have liked and everyone has kind of liked and thought differently of in the past couple of years. I think he deserves a chance to play and be a regular to see what he can do. Obviously, you don't want that young kind of guy mistake to happen in the playoffs, but all those guys back there are capable of making mistakes. So I would let it fly with Liljegren and give him a shot and see what happens. Whether that happens or not, I'm not sure, but that's what I would do. But I don't think Luke is a top pairing guy. And if you do that, you're probably setting him up to fail.
Well, it's kind of like the Lyubushkin situation last year, right? Where it's pretty clear that for all the talk of the Leafs as being this analytical team, that Sheldon Keefe and Kyle Dubas are looking for, I don't know if I want to say it's, yeah, they're looking, I mean, like, it's not any different than trying to add Nick Foligno. It's not like Nick Foligno is some kind of like data analytics wonderkin, guy. Like, they're adding these guys that bring a different element. And there are sections of the fan base, Jeff, that are really upset that they wanted Jake McCabe and Luke Schenn and like to change it in trading Sandin. And like, that's like been very controversial with kind of like the crony set of people. But I like what they did. I mean, I think Jake McCabe looks fantastic on that blue line.
But James, my question to anybody that has any complaints out of somebody leaving the organization for someone different, what success in the past happened where you're so mad that you're giving up? They haven't won anything. They haven't won a playoff series. I always go back to that. It's like Sandin was a part of a defense core in the play. Like, they didn't win. It's like, you can say that about their best players too. If they don't win again this year, it's like, how could you not want to explore moving the deck chairs around when you don't win? I'm actually surprised it hasn't happened sooner, but it hasn't. So anybody that says, oh, this or that, it's like, well, we haven't won squat in 6 years and 18 years total. So it's like, you try to switch things up and find the right mix. And if it doesn't work again this year, then you're looking at bigger pieces to change it up too. Who knows? But it's like, when you don't win, you can't complain about anybody changing it up.
You know what it's like in Toronto. Like, there's always people that support a lot of the team's decisions. And
what I support is what wins. If they can win with a certain lineup, I'll support that. And if they don't, I wonder why it would continue to be the same. So it's like, you're trying to change the dynamic. Will it work or not? We're going to find out in a month and a half.
All right. Well, you mentioned some of those core guys, and I was watching the broadcast, the pregame before the Jersey game, and I thought you made a good point. Like, you were like, I'm going to watch this game, and I want to see if Austin Matthews like takes over the game and just makes it an Austin Matthews game. And it really didn't happen. Like, obviously he scores a huge goal late, but you didn't walk away from that game being like, Jesus, he's back.
Yeah.
When does this worry you? Do you think it's just like the playoffs will be different? Like, he hasn't looked like the player. Like, last year, he legitimately looked like he was as good as McDavid. And this year, it's just like he's fine, but he's not that. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, he's the one who set the standard where you're watching it and you're like, every time he's on the ice, just moving, has the puck, can't stop him. His type of physicality, which is like in the corners, his like puck protection along the walls and stuff was outrageous last year, obviously. I just wonder what his health is like. I wonder what that cross check from Jamie Benn did to him, if anything. About, you talk about the knee, and it's just got to get better. Like, we always talk about, like, our chat we just had about the defenseman and changes or everything. Like, he's the most important piece of it all. Like, he is that alpha dog where it's like, Braden Point was the alpha dog. It sounds kind of crazy, but like a couple of years ago, it was like anytime there was a big goal needed, he was that guy. That's kind of what you're looking for from Austin Matthews. And people talk about the Boston Bruins, Jonas, as this wonder team, which they are. It's a season that's rarely been seen, and they just keep winning. They don't lose. But when you look at their rosters, you talk about matchups. At Bergeron and Krejci's age, which one of them should be able to handle Austin Matthews if he's dialed in? It shouldn't be. The answer is none of them.
Yeah. The Leafs should have the advantage at center. Yeah, when you look at, for sure.
Yeah, you look at Austin Matthews, if he is kind of got a growl on and he's pissed off and he's dialed in, I honestly, as many Selkies as Bergeron has won and as much respect as I have for him as a player, nobody should be able to handle that on that roster. So we'll see. But it's just got to get better, and he's got to get into that rhythm. I hope he's kind of in the mindset where it's like the only thing I care about is when the puck drops in the playoffs and then he turns into a monster. Maybe we'll see that. Maybe we don't. But it's just, if they're going to go places and do the things they want to do, he is the key, and it's just got to get better, because when he's not at its best, he's like an opportunistic goal scorer, much like the other night in Jersey. He had some good plays where he was weaving through the neutral zone and he had the puck, but it was like opportunistic chance, and he scores the game-winning goal. That doesn't, if you want to break it down and be honest about it, doesn't necessarily mean he was awesome. He got the job done, and he was an important factor, and he did what he does best, which is score goals. But we've all seen him play games where it's like, that's so impressive, and there's only one other guy out west that's better than that, basically.
There's no doubt in my mind that his health has been a huge factor this year. He just looks nothing. I mean, even his shot. And is it ever the case when you're an offensive player in the NHL that sometimes you have a season, you're just like, that wasn't it for me? And then some years you feel like, like when you had 41 goals, you just feel like that everything went in, and I was just on that year.
For a tier under him, James, I think that could be the case. Like, I enjoy and I get a kick out of saying I scored 41 goals in that league, but it's like, it's not like I was a consistent 40 goal scorer. When you're Austin Matthews and you have the capabilities of scoring 60, winning the Hart Trophy, scoring 4 goals in your first game, basically 40 is your basement number for a regular season. You have a standard that's way different than everyone else. So a guy like William Nylander, he might score 40 this year. It might be 29 the year after that. It might be 32. But when you're at the level of Austin Matthews and there's that much separation, that's why it's kind of a little bit alarming to watch when you're like, man, it looks a lot different. And as far as the playoffs go, it's got to get better.
Jeff, do you know what your adjusted goals were during that 45-goal season? Let's see here.
They didn't even keep track of it then.
No, they did. It's here. It's on Hockey Reference. Yeah, adjusted for era, it's actually 45 goals. And then the next year is 36, and then the year after that, 34. So your numbers all get a jump. Let me ask
you this. What did you just say? Adjusted goals was 45. So I was supposed to have 45?
Yeah, so like to adjust for the current condition.
So are players using that in like contract negotiations where it's like, I actually scored 12 goals, but I was supposed to score 30? Like, are they bringing that to the table with their agents or what?
I don't think you can. I don't think that works in arbitrate.
I don't think so either, man.
It's just, it's to try and compare players who played in your era when it was so low scoring to like the guys in the 80s, like the numbers that they racked up are just like video game numbers because of how many goals there were every game.
Those 90s and like early 2000s, man, it was a 2-1, 3-1 fest. Like, it was outrageous.
Yeah.
Like, you get 3 on the road in that era, like you're winning the hockey game pretty much.
Yeah. So if you look, what's that, James?
Go ahead, Jonas.
I was just going to say, like, you look at that 01, that season you had 41, the average goals per game was 2.76, and then right now it's 3.16.
Makes a big difference. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it makes a big difference.
Anyway.
Yeah, it does make a big difference. It's just the what you're allowed to do once you enter the offensive zone. I just watch these guys, how free they are, and it's like, you think of some of the defensemen, like in Dallas. You wheeled into Dallas and you had Darian Hatcher and Craig Ludwig and Richard Mapachuk and Daryl Sador, and they were on a killing mission. It was just like, it made you think twice about going in there. New Jersey, same thing. Scott Stevens, Ken Danico. It was just like, man, oh man, this never stops. So to be able to go in there and basically do what you want with the puck, that's why these guys have so much success.
Daryl Sador shutout. I love it. Kamloops Blazers legend.
Yes, he is. I knew you would like that, James.
Kamloops is going for Memorial Cup this year. It's going to be a big one.
They're hosting it?
They're hosting, yeah. And they've got a really good team. So I'm going. I got a ticket package. I'm going out there for all 9 days. So
Nice.
I'm going to sit with my old man.
No,
No, I'm going to be wearing a jersey sitting in the stands with my dad.
That's a lot of fun to do. That's a lot of fun.
Kamloops hosted last when I was 14 and I did that. So I'm going to go back and do it again we're both old guys now. So it's going to be fun. We got tons of questions from our listeners for you, O-Dog. The first one and the one that everyone wants to hear, Liz wants to know, do you have any great Pat Quinn stories?
Oh my God. They actually never stop. One of my favorites is I wasn't playing well in Florida, and Eddie Belfour had just set one of his own personal record, or he ties a Leaf record or something. And Pat called me in to the secondary dressing room in the locker room in South Florida, and I thought he was just going to give me the gears and say, "You need to get your game in order," whatever. And he pulled me aside and he asked me, there was an Irish pub beside our hotel, and he pulled me aside to ask me what the name of it was. And I told him, and I was like, I just avoided, I don't know, Pat was such a good guy, and I couldn't tell if he was mad at me. And I was really prepared for him to sit me down and say, like, the minors is an option or something really bad. And he asked me what the name of the pub was beside the hotel. So that was one of the times I was thankful it was Pat Quinn coaching me, because if it was anybody else, I would have been read the riot act.
Why did he want to know the name of the hotel
Because he wanted to go there. He wanted to go have some drinks after the game, and he wanted to know the name of it. And so I told him I had been there myself, probably quite frequently, but that was and in New York City, I was a healthy scratch for, I don't know, there was a bunch. And St. Paddy's Day was the next day. And Pat, that was like Christmas to him. He loved St. Patrick's Day. And I did too. And he called me after practice, and I thought he was going to bring me out again. And he just said, make sure you take it easy tonight, because you're probably going to be playing tomorrow. So don't go nuts at the Irish pubs. So I did appreciate that heads up from Pat as well.
What was he like when he was mad?
You know what? It was always like, he was such a good guy that it took a lot for him to get mad. Like, it took a bunch of games where you were mailing it in, and he just had no respect for that. It's like, if you go out there and gave like an effort and you got beat by a power play or an unbelievable performance from the opposition, he could live with that. But if you kind of had some mail-in efforts, he would give it to you pretty good. But he understood. He was a former player, and he was just such a nice guy that I think he had some Scotty Bowman in him, where it was like when you were losing, he would kind of ease off the gas pedal. And then when you were winning, he would kind of give it to you a little bit and kind of keep you on edge and keep you sharp. So that was a great approach from him.
All right. We got another question here. Well, you can answer first, Jeff. Bilal wants to know how many of the deadline rentals, the people that they've brought in, do you think the Leafs should try and keep or try and re-sign? Is there anyone there who you're excited about being a long-term Leaf?
I don't know. It's a great question, but it's one that kind of, it's pretty open-ended, because after what happens in this playoff run, you guys know there's some pretty big decisions coming up. So is there, like, I love when people say to me, because people like to chime in at Costco, at Raba, anything. I have to hear their thoughts. It's like, they better sign Ryan O'Reilly for a bunch more years. And I say, well, where is that money coming from? You're talking about Austin Matthews' decision. You're talking about William Nylander, who's going to be a fascinating decision, because I'm pretty sure Willie's going to be looking in this situation saying, I'm going to get paid too pretty soon. There's only so much money to go around. The one guy that I like, and I like the idea of him being here for a couple of years, I think Jake McCabe has settled in rather nicely. I think he's looked good back there. He kind of does a bit of everything. He skates well. His movements are good back there, and he's physical. So I kind of like him into the mix. But as far as who is going to stay long term or who can stay, I mean, Ryan O'Reilly's the guy that you would like, but do you want to invest money long term into the back end of his deal? I mean, I think that's a dangerous game in this era, where you're rewarding a guy for his past in a salary cap era at his age. It's like, how can you go long term, and how can you go big dollars with what's already on the books for these guys? O'Reilly would be nice, but it doesn't seem feasible.
Well, then you're totally right. But then you see a guy like Giordano play the way he is at 39, and they're getting such a bargain from him, and he's playing in their top 4. And some guys are just freaks and are able to do that.
Can you get 2 of those though? Can you get 2 of them? And the key is James, Giordano's doing it and playing decently for them at $850,000.
Yeah,
Ryan O'Reilly ain't signing for no $850,000. He's going to want. I don't know. He's going to want something because it's not going to be no hometown discount like that. I'll guarantee you that.
No, I mean, maybe they get a little bit less or something, but yeah, I think that's the thing that I think he's going to want some term on the deal too, right? So it's not going to be, it's a bit different than Jason Spezza and Joe Thornton and Giordano.
Yeah,
well,
like Ryan O'Reilly's probably going to want a 4 or 5 year deal or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, and like, what if he has this amazing playoff? Like he's, like Jeff said, how can you know until we see?
I think that,
exactly.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And what if he has a great playoff? Sometimes the smart play is to say, thank you very much for that playoff. And now you can go get that long-term deal. Yeah. You can't fall in love with one playoff and just, sometimes you got to say, thank you for that, but we're not biting on anything after that. And Kyle gets paid to make those decisions. So we'll see what happens. But I'm now that I've been watching it from like kind of what happens to players and deals that happen, it's like if you fall in love with a playoff performance, it could bite you in the ass down the road because sometimes after that, the performance doesn't match up with what's going on money-wise.
There's a few questions about Kyle Dubas and his situation and not having a contract and things like that. What do you think of that, Jeff? Like, do you like the way that the Leafs are handling this as an organization? Or
I'll just say one thing about Kyle Dubas and the work that he does. And I know enough people, I'm not an insider, but basically half the league is run by either guys I know or guys I played against. And Kyle Dubas is very well respected amongst hockey people. And I think if he was ever out of work, it wouldn't be very long. I've heard that was told to me even at Trade Center Day. If that ever would happen, he's not going to be unemployed for very long. He's smart. He's forward thinking. He can make things happen. And he's been showing a willingness this past 2 months to say, maybe we need to change things up in a different direction. And I would be quite confident that if things happen where it's like some kind of drastic bombshell, where one of the star players, being Nylander or Austin Matthews, said check please, and they wanted to go play somewhere else, I'm pretty sure that I would trust Kyle Dubas to make decisions to have plan B, because he's a smart guy and he can figure things out, and there would be a different option. So if people are just going to say, if they don't win, he's out. I mean, sometimes in sports that happens. Like, you don't win, the general manager sometimes loses the job. But I think he's a smart guy and he's a real good hockey guy. I think he's very well respected. And as I said, if he is out for some reason, he wouldn't be out very long because somebody would scoop him up.
Well, can I ask you on that, Jeff? Like, how much do you think this deadline in particular felt Shanahan-ish? How much do you think like his, I don't know, like influence would have played a part in this particular deadline with all the stakes?
I don't know. Shanny, like you would think there was probably some kind of meeting with everyone and saying, guys, we got to make something happen here. Like, if we get dummied in the first round, it's not going to be good for who knows how many of us. Yeah. So let's put our best foot forward and try to change the outlook of this group and the dynamic of this group and see if that can push them over the edge. I do like the changes, Jonas, but as I said, it's down to the core players that they believe in and that they believed in for the last several years and said, we're not going to make change for the sake of making change because we believe in those guys. So the changes are great, but those guys they believe in, one element that could cause anyone problems is when you hitch your wagon to those two goaltenders.
Yeah.
And if they shit their pants in the playoffs, you're going to have issues because it's like you decided that. You had belief in that, and that was your call. And if you get crushed in the first round and your goaltenders stink the joint out, you got to answer for that. And sometimes goaltending performances, they cost coaches jobs, and maybe sometimes they cost the general manager the job.
I remember talking to Craig Button one time about that, and he signed Roman Turek to a big contract, and it was just like, it's one of those things that I remember I was talking to him like 20 years after that happened, and it's still something that he thought about a lot, because it's tough. Like, how do you know? Like, Roman Turk has a great year and you give him a big contract and all of a sudden he's terrible. And you look at like Jack Campbell right now, like who would have expected to be one of the worst goalies in the league? Sometimes it's just rolling the dice.
It's a scary thing. Who would have thought after last year's performance all year long in the playoffs that Jacob Markstrom would play the way he has played the Flames this year? So it's an unpredictable thing to track and to deal with. It's just like, how horrifying would it be to be in Edmonton and watch Jack Campbell's performance? They're lucky they've got Stuart Skinner there to back him up and basically be their number one now. But to think this is year one of a 5-year deal. What on earth is this going to be in 3 years' time? It would scare the hell out of me. That's why the goaltenders and the term of contracts, and I mean, it's like every position player, but man, they can really throw a wrench into plans if they're not stopping pucks.
I saw fans there already talking about a buyout for Jack Campbell. You know, we're at 60 games into the first season of a 5-year deal.
I'll tell you what, that seems to be, I don't think in sports it's ever too early to kind of think like that, because it's like, you look at Jonathan Huberdeau as an example. It's like, not good this year. And then you think, let's talk about the likelihood of him being on top of his game and returning to Hart Trophy type form next year. Do you guys see that as a real possibility next year? It's hard to right now. It could happen, but damn, it looks like an impossibility right now. And his big contract kicks in next year.
That's crazy. He might not, he might get 60 points. He has 42 points right now.
I know. Last year at this time he had 80.
Oh my God.
Well, and his new deal is like 11 and a half or something incredible. So
there's been a lot of talk recently with the deadline coming of it is a big, like it's a life change for a lot of these guys. And that guy, everyone talks about his Instagram and the Lamborghinis and the Ferraris and the pool in the backyard. And he loved it. And who wouldn't love that? And he was making a bunch of money and he was playing great. He played with Barkov. And then he was removed from the situation, not his call. And that's a shock to the system. But I'll tell you what, pro sports doesn't really wait along for you to get comfortable and acclimated and stuff like that. Like you got to find a way to get it done. So he's a proud guy, and I like the chances. I actually like the idea of him getting it back together. But as the games keep going on and he doesn't produce, like you watch SportsCenter every day, and I'm like, okay, it's going to be a Jonathan Huberdeau highlight pack where it's like goal in the corner, pass from the corner, like Jonathan Huberdeau all over Kara and Lindsay's highlight packs, and you just haven't seen it this year.
Jim would like to know, Jeff, would you want to play in Toronto under today's media scrutiny with, everything that goes on social media and everything, or would you rather be somewhere like Carolina right now?
You know what? I realized I would stay, like I would love to play in Toronto with this, because I played here and you literally drive to the rink, you drive underground, you go up the escalator or up the stairs to the locker room, you do your thing, and then you go home. If you want to turn on Twitter and look at the nonsense, or if you're playing poorly, it does keep you hyper-focused because you want to be at your best. You don't want to be in the conversation in a negative tone, but I just love sitting on the back of the bus with Sundins and Tuckers and McCabe's talking about their playoff series and pulling out of the rink and Young Street going crazy. I love that stuff. And maybe you have to be from Toronto to have an appreciation for that. But I think all those guys there understand that it's a pretty cool place to play. I think Carolina is becoming kind of a landing spot too, a place where it's a great place to live, great weather, great climate, and they got a great fan base. So both are pretty good right now, but I wouldn't hesitate one bit. Although social media has changed a bit, the idea of playing in Toronto would still fascinate me.
All right, here's a good one that fans are going to be interested in. Jeff, what's your perspective on the impact of bringing in someone like Matthew Nyes in a playoff series? There's a kid coming out of NCAA.
Well, first of all, it would be a huge question mark. Just because he's this sought after practice doesn't mean you put a Leaf jersey on him and he gets to go in and play in a playoff series and be effective. He might not be ready to play. It's a big jump. I've seen unbelievable Ontario Hockey League players. James, I'm sure you've seen guys out west where you're like, there's no way that doesn't translate and that doesn't work. And they put the jersey on and you're like, what is that? That's not ready for the NHL. So it's a great idea. It would be an infusion of youth and size, and he's a big guy and he's good in the corners and all that. But you just don't put the jersey on and you're not guaranteed anything in pro sports. So it's a great idea and he could be a factor, but a lot has to happen for that to work.
What do you think, Jonas? One more?
Yeah, one more. I was just looking at Jeff's draft, and the guy, Jason Bonsignor, is that how you pronounce it? I can't remember.
Bonsignor, yeah.
Jeff's right. Like how many games did he play here? He barely played in the NHL.
Yeah. He went 4th overall, the next Mario Lemieux.
Yeah, 79 games he played. Yeah, so exactly what you're saying.
It's so much to ask a kid to go from NCAA and Nye's like a big part of his game there is like his physicality and his size. Like he's not going to have that kind of advantage in the NHL. So
no, everyone's 6'2", 200, right?
He needs to. Everyone needs to temper their expectations. I mean, if he comes in and makes an impact, then that's great, but it's a lot to ask.
It is. A lot has to happen for him to be an impact player.
This is a fun one for our last question here. I think maybe O-Dog, you can do something with this. Corey said he wants to give you the floor to take a free cheap shot at Hayes while you have the chance.
You know what? As much as Hayes drives me nuts, he likes to bring about debates, and it's honestly like when you get to work with probably the best radio host in North America, it's a treat every day. I'm very blessed to do TV with James Duthie, who I think there's nobody better in television as far as sports hosts in North America. And then I get to flip to radio and work with Brian Hayes. It's, the idea of having fun and giving him a chirp or whatever would be fun and all that, but he's just one of the best, if not the best. So he likes to needle, because sports radio, as you guys know, it's not about all agreeing and disagreeing, but at this particular time, nothing pops up. He doesn't have a really bad take that I can get at where I can chirp him, but I'm sure that's probably going to happen soon.
That'll change today.
Chirp his golf game, maybe?
Yeah, his golf game. I keep telling the guy, like, his dad screwed him for life. Like, he's a left-handed golfer. He's a left-handed hockey player, and his dad just had a right set of clubs in his garage, so he's still play right-handed. And I'm like, because I've seen him swing left-handed, I'm like, hey, Hayes. But he's just so amateur. Like, he just was like, I'll do whatever. But if he really wanted to play left-handed, he would be way better, but he just won't believe me. One day, maybe.
All right, Jeff, we'll let you get to it. You can listen to Hayes and O on Overdrive. Watch him on TSN. 260 adjusted goals in his career. Huh?
Yeah.
That's the real number. There you go.
That's real.
Guys, thanks for having me.
Thanks, O.